Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us here, Microsoft. We will have two outstanding guests to talk to today on our webinar. What we're looking at this webinar to do is to really talk about the journey to cloud and the power that partners like Amdocs and the TM Forum provide to all of us as we move in this journey to the cloud. You'll specifically hear around data and AI and how around data-driven insights and AI to deliver personalized experience. We'll also understand how we're using these technologies to accelerate time to market. And finally, we'll understand more around the journey that we've seen around BSS and OSS and how to simplify that journey and the processes to the cloud. So with that, I would like to introduce our speakers today. So the first is Ronen Fischler from Amdocs, who's the head of the Data Intelligence Business Unit. So Ronen, welcome. I'd also like to introduce, thank you, Ronen. I'd also like to introduce George Glass, the Chief Technology Officer for the TM Forum. So George, welcome to the webinar here today.
Hi, Monte, how are you?
Good. So hope you all are doing well. Let me start this off by Ronen, maybe asking you to, elaborate. How do you see the current state of data and insights within telco organizations, and how are some examples of where you're working with the operators and you're working with people like us here in Microsoft to really harness this first-party data and really move the data agenda forward with our operators?
Absolutely, great. So, we've been working at Amdocs with operator for the last 35 years, and particularly in the AI and BI domain, I've been involved with majority of the operators over the last few years. And I can say, we all hear the hype around machine learning, AI. It's definitely caught to the operators. They absolutely understand the necessity and the potential of AI. With customers' expectations today for getting the same experience that they're getting from Netflix or Facebook and so forth, with the pricing pressure that they're dealing with, and with overall, the quite challenging period that that even we're going through right now, they understand that AI and machine learning is what's gonna create a different in the way they can personalize the experience to the customer, the way they can promote new products and new tools, and the way they introduce new networks such as the 5G. And we see them working on many use cases, mainly I'd say at this point around cost cutting and operational use case. You'll see AI and ML being used, for example, for fraud. You'll see it used in the contact center for bots and so forth. But I don't believe that they still realize the ROI of the machine learning and AI. And the reason to that is, and we've done some really amazing projects where you've seen tremendous success, like, doing better targeting of customer, promoting new products and getting a much higher double-digit response. But all those projects, or most of them, I'd say, are one-off. They're projects that in order to get them to production, there is a lot of hard work to go and sift through the data and find what is the data that I need, clean it, and the entire effort is quite expensive. It requires a lot of people, and then it is not necessarily being in a point where it could be operationalized as an ongoing one. So it is more of a one-off. I'd say that the telco industry has a big legacy. And as a result of that, we're talking about a vast amount of data that comes in different shapes and from different line of business, very siloed. And the preparation of the data, the logistic behind the AI is where there is a struggle, and we see that's where most of those operators are spending their time. It is into how do I find the right data? How do I clean that muddy data and make it available? And yet it is mainly done still within the silos. So we see that AI, if I want to go, so we see that AI is definitely something that is catching up. We see that it is being used on quite a few use cases, as I mentioned, mainly on the operational and cost cutting, but it's not used to its maximum potential, and it is not used in between, I'd say, silos yet, where I believe, and you see them starting to change it with the move to the cloud. You see that, with their transition to the cloud, one of the first things that they're actually looking to move to the cloud is data, and they're taking the opportunity of moving the data to the cloud to really organize it in a different way that will allow them to unleash the power. Using hyperscalers such as yourself and the platforms to reduce costs of the data itself and operationalize it, and reduce the cost of the AI, and then use the platforms to provide a much more robust AI solution beyond the specific siloed use cases.
Ronen, thanks for that. One of the things you talked about was 5G, and clearly, I think I think George will speak about in a minute. Some of the impacts we're seeing and the TM Forum's done on 5G, and also allowing us to connect to other industries and ecosystems, and the importance of the open digital architecture aspects of TM Forum's doing. And I know that you're a big supporter of the TM Forum and what you're doing. As the 5G continues to evolve and we see more of this cross-industry play, more of this working with other digital ecosystems and telcos being able to connect seamlessly within those digital ecosystems, and more things moving to the edge, be interested in your view on the role that I think 5G and even the edge will bring in terms of data and AI, and being able to harvest all of those interactions that we're now going to have with not just the consumer customers, but also in this this B2B connected world. So maybe you can give us a couple of comments on and thoughts on how you see Amdocs and your point of view on the data and AI at the edge.
Sure. So I think when you talk about 5G, there's a couple of opportunities for the operators. One opportunity is actually as a network provider, and in a way, I think it is going in the direction of an infrastructure as a service or a network as a service, very similar to what we see from the hyperscaler, where customers today want to get a slice of network. You'll see elsewhere, hospital, for example, would like to have a slice of network dedicated for MRI with a specific bandwidth, and sometimes even to get the same type of thing that we see on the cloud, of the ability to go and have some secured bandwidth with ability and elasticity to go and change. So I think that one place where you'll see the investment and where you see AI and machine learning actually being used is within this core capabilities of the network itself to provide a network that could be highly personalized, to provide a solution that can be given. And you're right, I think that enterprises, the B2B business is what's going to, that's kind of the consensus, that's what's going to push this 5G market forward. The introduction of the IoT, which is led by a lot of those B2Bs, introduce a lot more devices. We're talking about billions of additional devices that now needs to be connected, devices that needs to be highly secured, and the ability to go and even give them capabilities, computing capabilities in the edge, right? So I think that the first thing when we go talk about it is really where they would make money is from just better managing their infrastructure, and being able to do it as a infrastructure as a service for those guys. And then the second opportunity is really to partner again with hyperscalers and provide IoT platforms, because when you think about all those businesses, they need to onboard IoT devices quite fast. They need to provide, they need to be able to manage those devices, security, and so forth. And the ability to go and actually give that as an end-to-end service, where not only I give you the network, but I give the infrastructure, I give the IoT framework. And on top of that, develop application, develop capabilities for provisioning, develop capabilities of machine learning and AI, which could then be, manifested by, helping creating smarter cities, smarter grocery stores, smarter supermarkets, and so forth. This is where you see a lot of the, I see a lot of the investment, and you see where the machine learning and the cognitive AI and so forth are being augmenting the 5G core capabilities on those two aspects, managing it better and then providing a better end-to-end solution and really be part of that business ecosystem.
Thanks, Ronen, for that. You touched on a number of points. I think that your point around all of these various touch points with IoT and the industries, the edge, and also just this broad acceleration, in 5G. Let me bring in George Glass, as I said, the Chief Technology Officer of the TM Forum. And George, would like to get your view and your perspective, because it's a big message the TM Forum is delivering around this interoperability as we move into these digital ecosystems and the operators move beyond connectivity. And importantly, as Ronen has talked about, how the data and the AI insights are providing a lot of that, foundation for innovation. So it'd be interesting to understand, your thought, your point of view from a TM Forum on how you see this maturing and where we've gone over the last, many months.
Yeah, Monty, I think it's a very interesting topic, and I'm listening with a lot of interest to what Ronen is sharing there. Obviously, Amdocs are one of our key members in the TM Forum, working alongside other members like Microsoft. And we developed the open digital architecture over a number of years. Initially, it started off very much as an architecture focusing on the telco space, and it was about digital transformation within the telco space. But what we quickly realized was that as we were delivering digital efficiency, so the patterns, the processes, the policies, the principles that we had developed for the telco architecture in terms of, the abstraction of business capabilities and exposing those via open APIs, making sure that the data was in the right location and was accessible by all of those components that needed access to the data, and recognizing that there was a degree of complexity coming into our solutions, not only because of technology, but also new services like 5G, which were creating opportunities. We realized that actually the digital efficiency that we are delivering in the telco market space was also driving a digital enablement. So it was actually creating the opportunity through the open APIs, through those industry standard interfaces for exposing the business capabilities of different services, gave us a very simple way to interconnect with other parties, with suppliers, with peers where we needed to expand the connectivity of the telco network. So if I'm offering a global service to get reach into a country that I'm not operating within. But it also enabled us then to move into vertical or adjacent markets, because many of the services that we provided, starting with the base connectivity service, were also very useful services in the health, agriculture, or smart cities environments, where, yes, they needed connectivity, but they also needed data processing capabilities, they needed charging capabilities, they needed service management capabilities. And actually, through the TM Forum, we've developed a suite of IoT APIs. We've got a device management suite of APIs and a service management suite of APIs specifically developed to actually move into those adjacent markets and make it easier to manage those services. One of the things that I wanted to touch on that Ronen mentioned was all the link back to data, machine learning, AI, and the cognitive capabilities that go around that. And I think what we're seeing is that the complexity of the IT estate, and that IT estate now encompasses the network elements because they're becoming software and behaving like IT systems, is becoming too much for the human brain to get its mind around. And we have to put in other controls into actually the operational systems to actually manage that complexity. And that started off initially around analytics. So actually getting the data and understanding what was happening, recognizing the patterns manually, and then devising new processes that built off those patterns. So developing feedback loops, which were slow. Then we realized, well, actually, some of that could be done where we could train the machines, we could learn from the patterns, and we could apply it automatically, the changes or the responses. So we started to see the introduction of machine learning. But increasingly, even that's not going to be quick enough, and we need this real-time response to changes in the network or to change events that are happening in the ecosystem. And that's where we see AI playing a very big role. So getting clean access to the data, having AI algorithms that are pre-tested and pre-trained available, and then that develop and mature over a period of time to actually enable us to manage this new world that's enabled by 5G, that's driven by the virtualization of the infrastructure, and that is manifesting itself as the network and ITs converge together into an ecosystem of what I would describe like IT capabilities.
George, thanks for that. That was great. We'll come back to you in a minute, talk a little bit more around some of the BSS OSS. But Ronen, I wanted to ask you, as George said, you've been and Amdocs has been, like with Microsoft, a large contributor to the TM Forum, specifically around your IntelligenceOne, product. Can you tell us a little bit more about that solution, and also address the question around, how do you see the opportunity as we look out into the future? So the opportunity that we have that I think some of your technology is delivering, a lot of the stuff the TM Forum is doing, but really that opportunity for these operators moving forward. So maybe you can talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. I think when as a background to the product, I think that when we looked at the telco and when I came over and we looked at the telco industry and the current state, one thing that I kind of felt is that when you look at a telco, their DNA is within the network, right? And when you talk about, we are going to build the next network, whether it's a 3G or 4G or 5G, then you're the hero. The budget goes there, and this is where the focus. That's the pure DNA of the operators. However, when you look at data, it was until not too far, I'd say, it was never really being treated in the same way. And one of the things that we claim is that data is a network by itself. And if you look at the future, it's not a lake, it's not a pond, it's not something, it's the data network, it's a data intelligence network that those operators are going to bring. And we see it's a positioning question, but it's a very important positioning question, because once we start to see, that the operators get it, and say, well, yeah, actually, you're right. It's about how those flow of data getting connected together, how this data is becoming into something that is much more insightful, that I can go, and as a result of that, change the entire, have an impact on the business itself. That's when it clicks. And in our mind, the data network is going to outlive the 5G, the 4G network, and that's the real IP that these guys are starting to build. I hear today in advertising sometimes, two competitors talk about we have 5G, we have 5G. I mean, great, you both have 5G, but as a user, who cares? What I want to know is that I'm getting a personalized services, that I'm getting those services that really fits to me. And this is really, once you start to look at the data as a data network, then now you need to start to build it. And one of the things that we've been doing with actually working with TM Forum on how do you take this data and organize it? How do you build this data network, right? How do you go and connect all those different components into something, into a semantic layer that makes sense? And what we've started to create is basically a services and solution that allows you, first of all, to create your data network on the cloud. So it is migrating this data, it is creating and organizing it, using the cloud as an opportunity to go and modernize the way you treat data and create it into a one network. Where on top of that, and here we're using standards that are, that's actually certified by TM Forum, that are really looking into how you connect all those things together. And once we have it there, now we're adding, and what we're doing is we're adding additional KPIs and capabilities using and leveraging our experience in this domain for 30, 35 years to have those things kind of on a day zero or 0 day, you have all those KPIs and all those insights and capabilities on top of it. Now, what we're doing with this IntelligenceOne is taking it to the next level. So once you have those KPIs and those things, I personally don't necessarily believe that we need to do AI for a specific use case. I think that the AI needs to be what we call the AI on top, which means it takes all this data and we want the AI to actually help us figure out, recommend on things that we may want to, do. It gives us some insight that are beyond, the local specific business, right? And in order to do that, you need to go and create this framework, infrastructure that knows to onboard algorithms, that know to take data and enrich it, that know to find automatically relationship between those type of data and so forth. And those are things that we're doing today using solutions such as the Microsoft Azure and the cognitive ML and so forth. Now, and then you start to look at it, and because if you think about it, look at what happened in COVID-19. You could have created all those use cases, and suddenly COVID-19 came, and I've heard a lot of operators say, hey, see, AI didn't really help us. We didn't have that specific use case. I think that, that's where, the industry is changing, and what IntelligenceOne is doing is kind of going from, if you think at Mark Zuckerberg, at some point he said, move fast, break things, and then he changed it into move fast, create a platform, right? I mean, I think that today, when we're looking at this industry, we're creating platform. And with IntelligenceOne, what we bring is a platform that allows you to onboard that data, okay, to be able to create that entire life cycle for the AI on top of the entire business. So we're looking at data from network and billing and the collection and usage to then be able to go and help you to figure out which product you may want to launch. And when you look into a product, what impact does it have on the network, this product? And does this product cannibalize another product or not? And what is the customer satisfaction? Exactly the same way if you think in how Netflix and those guys, like the very clear KPI that are holistic around the services that I'm bringing to the customer, to provide a service that is highly personalized and that is coming in the right pricing and can be that you as a user would feel that it is tailored to you in a segment of one. When you're looking at that now, I think so. The first thing is that platform, but I think the next thing, and that's where we also leverage some of Microsoft capabilities, such as the Power BI and so forth, is where you actually taking this and how do you make it accessible to the business? Because a lot of time when you look at this data, and AI and so forth, you end up having some data scientists doing something, but the executive don't necessarily have the ability to see the outcome of this algorithm. And once he has it, I think the next thing that you want to do, so you want to have it accessible to him, but there is always a question of, do I believe in it? And what we try to do here is to be able to allow you to explain that AI, to let you to drill in and figure out what it is and why the AI recommended what it recommended, what we call an explained AI. So if you think about it, we're looking at two main offerings that are on the cloud. One is we're building your data network. We're helping you to build and use our knowledge to create those out-of-the-box KPI and so forth. And the second thing is we're providing you a way to visualize it and to the business to actually be able to use it and trust this data while maintaining the entire life cycle and embedding it into the business processes that the operator is dealing with.
Ronen, thanks for that. Let me pose this to both you and George. Maybe, Ronen, I'll start with you, which is, in the data and AI, we've heard a lot of the great things we can do, and it will help to some of the B2B innovation and a journey to the cloud and accelerate a lot of that. But this isn't easy to do. You talked about the silos. You talked about people look at your use case versus the overall capability. From all of the workings that both Ronen, you yourself and George have done with a lot of your operator customers and members, what are the top one or two or three key challenges that they're seeing? Right? I personally experienced the aspect of it was just getting access to all the data, as you said, Ronen. You have this in all different silos, or was the quality of the data, or the master data management, or how do you, as you said, leverage that out and democratize the data. So be interested in your views, maybe just a couple minutes from each of you around, what are some of those key challenges that you see in this whole data and AI space? And what do you see as what are some of the things the operators are doing to address those challenges? So maybe, Ronen, we'll take a couple minutes with you, and then George, I'll come to you in a couple minutes.
Sure. So I think that the telco has, as I mentioned before, has a legacy. If you think about telco, it started 100 years ago, and it's, for the majority of the time, it was just dealing with telephony. And then, it was the text and the data started to go in, and now we're suddenly, there is the media and the entire, if you look today at these companies, they're completely changed. And as a result of that, I think that, they're facing a real challenge, that they have a lot of data. And I think that also culturally, they had to go through a lot of evolution. I believe that it is not just that the data is hard. It's also that I think the mindset until recently was that this is my data and I own it. I think that there is a big change, now. Following the the Teslas of the world and so forth, where you see that there, if you look at the Tesla, Microsoft, Apple, I think a lot of it is about breaking silos. I think there was an understanding in those industries that data is a commonwealth. And it's not only that I create it, I need to publish it so everybody uses it. And I think that we see this transition right now in the telco. I think that transition is painful because of all the history and all the data that they have. But if you look at the leading companies in this domain, you see that one of the first things that they do as they move to the cloud is really to go and ask the different businesses, the different entities to share their data into one commonwealth where they start to drive insights and monetize it. So I think it's a combination of the data challenge, it's the culture, and the last thing is that this domain is highly regulated and with a lot of quite a big amount of data. And I think that we're lacking some tools in that domain that can really help you manage this scale, govern it in a way. And I believe that we'll see in the next few years a lot of tools and capabilities in that domain to really help you, on top of the objective problems that I mentioned before, to really help you to simplify the way you handle data, to simplify the way you ingest data and the way you analyze data.
Thanks, Ronen. Appreciate your insights on the data and AI and what you as a company are doing with Amdocs, what your IntelligenceOne product is doing. Maybe we can now, George, get your kind of take on, what are some of those key challenges, and then I think we can kind of then venture into the BSS OSS world, which is a key contributor with this data and AI. So maybe, George, just your thoughts on some of those key challenges as you spoke about what you heard from Ronen around just the data and AI and the operators are really harvesting that and harnessing the power of what that brings to either innovate more or accelerate their digital transformation.
Yeah, those are great points, Ronen, and actually I would echo many of them that you shared there. And it's certainly something through our AI program that we've been running in the TM forum that you've been part of. Those are some of the consistent challenges that we hear from our members. It's things like their organization has too many data silos. The data is distributed across their architecture and across their IT estate. So therefore, even to try and run AI, it's like, what data do you run it against? And even they struggle even with the basics of access to the data and even consistency amongst the data sets. So you're trying to compare, network faults or network alarms, but you've got two different types of networks. So you're comparing apples with pears, and it's just very difficult to do. There's also, we've noticed a skills gap and a skills shortage just in people who understand data science, understand data models, and are actually able to build, the necessary AI algorithms. And then as you start to think about AI and start to adopt AI, then we've been working with our members to develop things like what we call our AI checklists and our AI model cards. And those are very important because of things like, security and privacy. Do you actually have permission to use this data in the way that you're going to use it for the purpose that you're using it for from the customers? And those things are certainly concerns that our members have. And things like our AI model cards and our AI checklists allow you to verify some of those things and be sure that what you're actually doing is consistent and compliant with the security and privacy rules in the jurisdiction that you're operating, and also give you good insights into, what data do I need? What am I going to use it for? Have I got permission to use it? And can I actually then deploy and operate this at scale? Because yes, you can try little AI proofs of concept in silos or in niches. But I think, as Ronen said, we're really talking about, the IT architecture being effectively a data architecture. The data, or a data network, the data is all over our architecture, and it is that information, that data, that gives us the insight into how our business is performing, what the customer experience is, what's the status of our network, what service is running and what service is not running, and when or if a service is about to fail. And certainly we've seen some very exciting and insightful work that we've been doing with things like the AI-based anomaly detection and error correction project that's spun off into a catalyst. We've been demonstrating some of those capabilities through work in the TM forum that absolutely echo what Ronan's been talking about in terms of this data network and it becoming a pervasive capability that you need right across the organization. So those are just some of the things we've seen, the consistency of the data, the skill sets to process it, and then the tools to actually monitor it and actually set yourself up for the operation that you need going forward based on the complexity and volume of the data that we now have to process.
Thanks, George, for that. I really love that. Oh, sorry, Ronen, go ahead.
Maybe just to close the loop, because I wanna also refer to what George said before on 5G. I think that the near real time, that's one thing that we're going to see. I mean, we spoke about the challenge, the privacy, the complexity of the data, but 5G makes it a necessity to analyze things and do the machine learning in real time. You cannot manage today an antenna without real time. It has 4,000 different parameters that you need to manage, unlike 4G, where the numbers was in the tens. So it's become a must, and I believe that that's something else that is a challenge. Once you arrange all this data and so forth, that's one thing. But how do you make sure that it's not stale? How do you make sure that you can make the decision on the time? I wanted to. I think George, you mentioned it before, and I think that that's another critical point that we're going to see changes over the last years as these operators wants to be competitive in a tough market.
Yeah, thanks, Ronen. I think you're spot on that. As George goes, I love this concept about the data network. I think it's a real interesting way to look at that. That it's really about that overlaying kind of data fabric. George, coming back to something we mentioned, I talked about earlier is early last year the TM Forum published some research around that. I don't know, around 5% or so the telco, the non-network workloads have only been migrated to the cloud. 5% is quite a low number. Have you seen this trend really change over the year? I mean, have you seen it accelerate more now with COVID, or as Ronen said, as everything's becoming more real time now? I mean, that need for volume and velocity is just going to increase. I'd be interested in where you see now is heading in the BSS OSS space, which is really a kind of a big feeder for a lot of the data and AI. But where do you see that now, and especially in operators' journey to the cloud?
Yeah, just as a point of clarification, Monte, that 5% was for movement to public cloud. And wasn't including or counting those operators that were moving services to private cloud. And obviously, if I include private cloud, the figures would be much higher. But it was a report specifically on public cloud. But you're absolutely right. We have seen a change. We have seen that trend continuing. And we have seen more and more of our operators developing solutions that are cloud native from the outset. That's the premise of the open digital architecture from the TM Forum, and it's not something I'm surprised about. And I've blogged about it, and I've written about it in white papers. And I am very upfront in saying, operators will be moving their applications to the public cloud. And I say that with confidence because I come from an operator background myself, and I know the sorts of amounts of money that we could invest in a data center, and it pales into insignificance compared to the amount that the hypercloud providers are investing in their capability for the virtualized infrastructure of the public cloud. And I think what I heard 3, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, when I talked about the movement to the cloud, there was all of the excuses of those who were reluctant to go there. They would cite concerns over data privacy or data security, or not knowing where the data was going to be because a cloud provider could move it around through various data centers and your data could be scattered all over the world and you had no control over it. I think I've seen that many of those concerns and worries have been allayed with the technology and the security that's offered by the public cloud. And what I'm seeing is increasingly our operator members are moving their services to the cloud, and also the vendors are now developing cloud-based solutions for the operators. So that's what they're selling. So no longer are they actually selling them hardware and software that they deploy into a data center, because they're actually saying, our application is configured and designed to run in a container to be deployed in the cloud. And the operators are buying software like that and deploying that software and increasingly deploying that into the cloud. Now, there's two aspects, and I would very much want to differentiate between those two aspects. And that is those operators that are doing it, where I would describe them as they are cloud enabling their applications. So they're taking a complete application, dropping the application into a container and deploying that into the cloud. And those that are going truly cloud native, where they're taking the components of the application, deconstructing the application, building those components, putting those components each into a container of its own and deploying those into the cloud. And if you do full cloud native, which is the latter of those descriptions, then you get the flexibility and the power of the cloud. You can actually leverage the point scalability that you need for specific components, as opposed to having to scale the entire container to support just a tiny portion of the application that's running within that container. So I actually am seeing, for logical reasons, for technical reasons, for good architectural principles, a movement by both our members on the operator side and the vendor side to adopting cloud-based solutions and embracing and delivering cloud-based solutions, partly because that's what the vendors are selling in the marketplace, and certainly because that's what the operators are asking for. You ask about what's accelerating it or what's driving that change, and I've got to say it's digital transformation. It's people looking at their business and saying their business needs to become digital. They need to have a set of interoperating services or microservices that can be called upon, that can scale, that can be deployed in an environment that is not constrained by the infrastructure that was there previously or that was previously procured, i.e. it's an elastic infrastructure. And that digital transformation, both within our industry in the telco space and also happening in adjacent industries, is very much driving the movement to the cloud. People are using it to tackle technical debt and legacy issues. So they've got applications that are end of service life, and in those cases then actually doing cloud enablement, wrapping that application in a container and deploying it into the cloud until you can migrate off it is a perfectly valid architectural approach to your transformation and your migration away from legacy applications and addressing technical debt, because you can't maybe maintain hardware that's obsolete or manage databases or application software that's obsolete. We're also seeing it as a case of new business capabilities. 5G is actually driving the need for new BSS capabilities. We're needing ultra-low latency services, things like real-time charging, real-time decision-making in terms of next best offer for a customer when the customer's on the line, or the real-time analytics around anomaly detection. So I detect that based on the following status information or KPIs, these components of my network failed in 30 seconds. Therefore, I need to restructure them or reset them before that happens and impacts a customer. And those things are then driving me to having this larger infrastructure of capabilities that can be deployed and can flex dynamically. And 5G is also driving that. So the use cases around 5G, where that real time becomes a really important aspect of it, be it the low latency for the customer experience in gaming, or the low latency just from a safety perspective when I've got autonomous vehicles and I want to make sure that I don't crash into something. And all of those things are actually driving me to an architectural solution that's running in the cloud and starts to support what I would call dynamic workload allocation. So starts to look at making sure that the functions that I need are at the location on the cloud environment that actually suits the latency or the performance requirements of the service that I'm trying to deliver to my customers. So that could be at scale. I put it in the hypercloud to run back-end billing functions at the end of the month to generate hundreds of thousands of bills every night. Or it could be a real-time decision component that actually runs right next to the consumer of the service so that they get that ultra-low latency response from the application. And that looks like something that means the functions that I have, because that low latency real-time service running on the device could be a charging capability to do real-time charging, but that same function needs to be embedded into my billing application so I can charge for services. So I need the ability to take that service and move it from my hyperscale core cloud, maybe through to my edge cloud for some services, or even right out to my device cloud for some other services. And therefore, I've now got this concept of my software application is moving about within my deployed infrastructure, utilizing the cloud-based services that the cloud providers provide that give me a consistency between the core cloud and the functions it provides, the edge cloud and the device cloud. So all of these things are where I see our operators and vendors actually leveraging the cloud capability and actually utilizing that to deliver enhanced services and features to their customers.
Yeah, George, love that. Always interested to hear your point of view in the team forum in general. I do agree that as you talked about this journey to the cloud, BSS OSS, for many of us that have been in the industry for a long time, has been there forever. But it's kind of been one of those back office things as you talk about becoming more cloud enabled or cloud native, having that ability to really introduce new capabilities. Maybe Ronen, you can speak. I mean, Amdocs is one of the key providers in the industry. You're a big participant with Microsoft and the TM forum as well. Maybe give your view, your take for just a couple minutes around some of George's points around really moving to those cloud native architectures.
Yeah, I completely concur with George. We see the operators moving to the cloud. We're talking about some of those BSS are monoliths. They're old, as George mentioned. In some of them, you'll get into a point where the database is no longer being supported, and you need to do those changes. So what we're seeing is it's not everything's going to be completely written as native. The transition is not going to happen in one day, and there might be some components that those operators will want to live on premise. We're building as we work with them. We're building the solutions that that could really work up to to the way that they want to do it. So there could be components, let's say, for example, the catalog. It's a component that could quickly be moved to the cloud, and support many other systems that are on premise. But once you have the catalog on the cloud, now you can easily add, for example, a lot of AI and machine learning capabilities into it to help to figure out, which new bundles I want to create, at what price, and so forth. So you could see the mix and match where, there will be some components that will move to the cloud and will run in a native way. And then there could be some components that will just be moving to the cloud as one component, as George said, without, the native. Even for a duration of a project, even if the if the operator decides to move to a fully native application, it's going to take time. We're talking about years, right? What do you do with the existing system? Some of them will say, okay, I want to move that also because I could get some gains immediately. Think about the billing cycle, for example. We know that toward the end of the month, we need way more resources than during the month itself. Just taking the application itself as a monolith, putting it on the cloud, yet using the CPU services and the elasticity of the cloud helps me reduce costs. So we see all those variations that George was talking about, whether it is we're going to go with a new platform. It's a project for 5 years. In the meantime, we may decide to leave this on-premise, or we may want to move it to the cloud to gain some benefits, financial benefit, just from having it on the cloud, despite that it's not native. And I think that, TM Forum here is actually paving the way with that whole API and the whole way of interaction of these systems and what they need to provide really helps those operators to go in that journey.
Yeah, just interject there. I think that one of the key things that we've got with the open.
Go ahead, George.
Okay, one of the key things we've got with the open digital architecture, as Ronen said, is that decoupling between the components and between the domains of the architecture, so that it's a business decision about what you put to the cloud, what you retain on premises, what you migrate to strategic components, what you retain as legacy, and expose the business capabilities through the open APIs. And there's nothing to prevent you, and we've seen many of our members do this, actually wrapping the legacy components with the open APIs so that they work and interoperate with your strategic components. And then it becomes a business decision as to when you execute your migration from one component to the other. And that can de-risk your migration, but it also starts to leverage the power of the cloud, as Ronen suggested. So you do get the scalability, the elasticity, and the cost benefits of having some components that were maybe at end of life, running out of steam on legacy hardware or legacy databases. You can actually preserve their life for a year or two while you migrate off them and spend your money on somewhere else, which is what your return on investment is going to be measured on. So I think it's very interesting to see how the actual decoupling of the architecture has actually enabled the transformation and the migration to the cloud in a controlled manner by both the operators and by the vendors providing services that can plug and play into that architecture.
Yeah, that's great. And I love the insights, Ronen and George, from you guys around this whole aspect of data and AI and our migration to the cloud and the role that BSS will play. And, it is a very interesting world. So, we're at the end of our webinar. Got a couple more things to go through with you, but I did want to really, again, just thank Ronen and George one time again for everything you've done here and everything. I think, TM Forum, Amdocs, Microsoft, we continue to provide that value to the operators, right? What can we all do together? And so I think we all work as members of the forum. We all work on bringing that forward. So we'll come back with a few wrap-up things, but let me just play a real quick video for you just to kind of leave you with a last few-minute thought. So if we can just roll the video for a minute.
The future of telecommunications is built on innovation. With industry-leading solutions on a trusted, secure platform, Microsoft empowers the innovation for your future of insights, experiences, and growth.
Again, I just want to thank all of you, all of our customers, all the operators here that George and Ronen and our organizations interact with on a daily basis. I want to thank you for all your time. Appreciate you listening in. I love hearing from the points that Ronen has brought up, the points that George has brought up. I think it really is about this digital transformation. It is about moving to these new spaces. So again, thank you for attending, and I hope to see you again soon. Thank you.